Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. This is James Corbett of CorbettReport.com. You are tuned into Questions for Corbett, and this week's question comes in via email from Deborah, who writes, I'm looking for a video I saw a brief portion of in which a retired military officer was explaining what he was really doing during his career in terms of which corporations he liberated which land or resources from the people to do what with. If this rings a bell for you, could you please tell me what or where I might find it again? Okay, thank you for the question, Deborah, and without any other information to go on, I am 99.9% certain that you are referring to some form of probably reenactment of one of Major General Smedley Butler's famous speeches that he was giving in the 1930s, generally under the title, War is a Racket, and hopefully the name Major General Smedley Butler will ring a bell for you, if not directly from history, at least you will remember that, of course, I did refer to Major General Butler in the World War I conspiracy. For the would-be engineers of society, war, with all of its attendant horrors, was the easiest way to demolish the old traditions and beliefs that lay between them and their goals. This was recognized early on by Cecil Rhodes and his original clique of co-conspirators. As we have seen, it was less than 1 decade after the founding of Cecil Rhodes' to achieve the peace of the world, that vision was amended to include war in South Africa, and then amended again to include embroiling the British Empire in a world war. Many others became willing participants in that conspiracy because they too could profit from the destruction and the bloodshed. And the easiest way to understand this idea is at its most literal level: profit.
War is a racket. It always has been. It is possibly the oldest, easily the most profitable, surely the most vicious. It is the only one international in scope. It is the only one in which the profits are reckoned in dollars and the losses in lives. A racket is best described, I believe, as something that is not what it seems to be to the majority of the people. Only a small inside group knows what it is about. It is conducted for the benefit of the very few at the expense of the very many. Out of war, a few people make huge fortunes. In the World War, a mere handful garnered the profits of the conflict. At least 21,000 new millionaires and billionaires were made in the United States during the World War. That many admitted their huge blood gains on their income tax returns. How many other war millionaires falsified their tax returns? No one knows. How many of these war millionaires shouldered a rifle? How many of them dug a trench? How many of them knew what it meant to be hungry in a rat-infested dugout? How many of them spent sleepless, frightened nights ducking shells and shrapnel and machine gun bullets? How many of them parried a bayonet thrust or an enemy? How many of them were wounded, were killed in battle?
As the most decorated Marine in the history of the United States at the time of his death, Smedley Butler knew of what he spoke. Having seen the minting of those tens of thousands of new millionaires and billionaires out of the blood of his fellow soldiers, his famous rallying cry, "War is a racket," has resonated with the public since he first began, in his own memorable words, trying to educate the soldiers out of the sucker class. Again, I hope you will be familiar with Major General Smedley Butler, because it is absolutely, his story is a fascinating one, precisely because one would not expect to find among the ranks of the passionately, fervently anti-war such a big name from U.S. military history. And again, it's hard to encapsulate in just a couple of sentences how pedigreed Major General Smedley Butler was, but if you look, for example, at the handy-dandy Wikipedia entry, Major General Smedley Darlington Butler was a senior U.S. Marine Corps officer who fought in both the Mexican Revolution and World War I. Butler was, at the time of his death, the most decorated Marine in U.S. history. During his 34-year career as a Marine, he participated in military actions in the Philippines, China, in Central America, and the Caribbean during the Banana Wars, and France in World War I. Butler later became an outspoken critic of American wars and their consequences. Butler also exposed an alleged plan to overthrow the United States government. Oh yeah, remember that? By the end of his career, Butler had received 16 medals, 5 for heroism. He is one of 19 men to receive the Medal of Honor twice, one of 3 to be awarded both the Marine Corps Brevet Medal, along with Wendell Neville and David Porter, and the Medal of Honor, and the only Marine to be awarded the Brevet Medal and 2 Medals of Honor, all for separate actions. So again, this is not just any wild-eyed, crazy, commie, hippie, anti-war person. No, this is one of the most decorated Marines in history, and who took a very strong and very informed anti-war stance. And as I say, he was going around in the 1930s delivering his famous speech, "The War is a Racket," which is available in a printed edition. It has been published, so there is that edition of that speech, but he did give variations of it throughout the 1930s. And as far as I know, I don't think there is any actual newsreel footage of him delivering the speech itself. There is newsreel footage of Smedley Butler, including talking about the business plot, the plot to overthrow the U.S. government back in the 1930s. All of that type of information is contained in the podcast episode that I did on Smedley Butler, episode 123 of the Corbett Report podcast. So please go and refamiliarize yourself with that. But I think perhaps one of the most important passages, and one that sticks in a lot of people's minds when it comes to Smedley Butler, and probably the one you're referring to in your email specifically, Deborah, is actually not from that printed edition of the War is a Racket speech, but it is remarks attributed to Smedley Butler with the year 1933 attached. I'm not sure. This is all online in various forms and different places, so I'm going to provide a link to one of these, but it apparently at some point in 1933, he did say the following: "I spent 33 years and 4 months in active military service as a member of this country's most agile military force, the Marine Corps. I served in all commissioned ranks from second lieutenant to major general, and during that period I spent most of my time being a high-class muscle man for big business, for Wall Street and for the bankers. In short, I was a racketeer, a gangster for capitalism. I suspected I was just part of a racket at the time. Now I am sure of it. Like all the members of the military profession, I never had a thought of my own until I left the service. My mental faculties remained in suspended animation while I obeyed the orders of higher-ups. This is typical with everyone in the military service. I helped make Mexico, especially Tampico, safe for American oil interests in 1914. I helped make Haiti and Cuba a decent place for the National Citibank boys to collect revenues in. I helped in the raping of half a dozen Central American republics for the benefits of Wall Street. The record of racketeering is long. I helped purify Nicaragua for the international banking house of Brown Brothers in 1909 to 1912. I brought light to the Dominican Republic for American sugar interests in 1916. In China, I helped to see to it that Standard Oil went its way unmolested. During those years, I had, as the boys in the back room would say, a swell racket. Looking back on it, I feel that I could have given Al Capone a few hints. The best he could do was to operate his racket in 3 districts. I operated on 3 continents." Some typically powerful words there, and to the point, for a very plain-spoken military man who was deeply ashamed, I think, of his record when it came to his post-service career. So, anyway, Major General Smedley Butler, I'm pretty sure that's who you're referring to. There's a lot of recreations, as I say, of his speeches online. I'll throw in a link to the War is a Racket audiobook edition, the Vox edition that's up on archive.org. But again, you can find it in a number of different places. If you haven't yet, please do look into Smedley Butler. Very, very important person from history that it would behoove us to know about. And precisely for that reason, someone who isn't necessarily touted on the History Channel at all times.